She waited until there were 4 days left. Then she took my hand and told me the one thing she'd spent 34 years protecting me from. My name is Gabriel. I'm 34. I grew up in a small city in upstate New York, the only child of a woman named Ruth, who was a librarian and a gardener and the most grounded person I have ever known. My father, the man I called my father, left when I was 3. I have almost no memory of him. He was not part of my story. Ruth was my whole story. She was the kind of mother who made the world feel like it had been designed with you in mind. When I was sick, she read to me until I fell asleep. When I failed at something, she was specific about what to try differently, never vague. She came to every school event, every play, every uncomfortable recital where I played the recorder badly in a gymnasium that smelled like industrial cleaner. She was at my college graduation. She was in the front row at my first art show, which hung in a small gallery in Brooklyn, and she cried in that particular quiet way of hers, not making a production of it, just letting it happen. I had a good life. I want to say that first because the rest of this story is hard and I don't want it to eclipse the thing that is most true. Ruth gave me a good life. She gave me every important thing. Whatever else is true, that is true. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. If you know anything about that particular cancer, you know that the timeline it offers is not generous. By the time they found it, the prognosis was already difficult, and 6 months later the prognosis became a certainty, and then we were in the business of time, counting it, protecting it, spending it as carefully as you spend the last of something irreplaceable. I moved back to be with her. I stayed in my old bedroom. I drove her to appointments. I made the soups she liked, which were specific and had particular combinations of ingredients that I am the only living person who knows. I sat with her in the evenings and we watched old movies and talked about everything except the one thing that was coming, because she didn't want to make me practice grief before I had to. 4 days before she died, she asked everyone to leave. I had been sitting with her for the afternoon. Her closest friend Martha was there and the hospice nurse and a neighbor who had been bringing food. Ruth said with the particular quiet authority she'd always had that she needed the room. Everyone went. The hospice nurse said she'd be right outside. Ruth took my hand. Hers felt lighter than it used to. She had lost weight in a way that still managed to surprise me even though I'd been watching it happen for months. She said, "Gabriel, I need to tell you something. I should have told you years ago. I've been trying to find the right time for 20 years and the right time never came, and now this is the only time I have left." I told her she didn't have to. Whatever it was, she didn't have to. She said, "I do, because you'll find out anyway after, and I want you to hear it from me." She told me that she was not my biological mother. She told me that I was the son of her younger sister Patricia, the woman I had known my entire life as Aunt Patty, who lived in Florida, who sent birthday cards with $20 bills, who called Ruth every Sunday, and who I had seen maybe a dozen times at family events. Aunt Patty, who was warm but a little distant, who seemed to look at me sometimes with an expression I hadn't known how to read and had never tried to. Ruth told me that Patricia had become pregnant at 20, alone and without resources, in a situation that wasn't safe. She'd called Ruth, who was 7 years older and had a stable life and a house and a husband who was, at that point, still present. Ruth had said yes before Patricia had even finished asking. She had meant it immediately and completely. The adoption was private and informal in the way such things sometimes were in the late 1980s. There was documentation done quietly. Patricia moved to Florida shortly afterward, partly to start over and partly, Ruth said, because proximity to me would have been too difficult. She had visited. Those dozen times I remembered were deliberate. Patricia had chosen to be Aunt Patty rather than disappear entirely. Ruth said they had agreed on it, that Patricia could be present in my life at the edges, that I would know her and have some relationship with her, but that Ruth would be my mother. That had been the arrangement. I sat with all of this for a long time in that room, while Ruth held my hand. I didn't cry immediately. I went through something that felt like a software update, a slow rewriting of the architecture of everything I thought I knew. Every memory of Aunt Patty playing back differently. Every moment Ruth had been my mother playing back with this knowledge underneath it. The same memories, all of them, now slightly different in their background. I asked Ruth if Patty knew she was telling me. She said yes. She said she had spoken to Patricia the week before. She said Patricia had wanted to be the one to tell me herself, but that Ruth had said no, that it was hers to tell, that it had been her secret to hold for 34 years, and it was hers to release. I asked her why she'd waited until now. She said she'd been afraid. Not afraid I would love her less. She said she believed I wouldn't. Afraid that knowing might unsettle something in me, might make me feel like the ground of my life had shifted under me. She said, "I didn't want you to spend your whole life wondering whether you were really mine." I told her she should have told me sooner. She said she knew. She said she was sorry. Then she said, "You were mine, Gabriel. I chose you every single morning for 34 years. Every single one." She died 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning just before the light changed in the room. I flew to Florida 2 weeks after the funeral. Patricia was standing on her porch when I drove up. She had been crying already. She looked at me the way she must have been looking at me in some interior way for 34 years, with the full force of something she'd kept behind glass. We talked for 6 hours. I have a brother and a sister I didn't know about. A whole family tree that belongs to me and that I had no access to. Medical history that would have been useful to know. And a woman who made a choice at 20 that she has been making peace with ever since. Not the choice to give me up, she said, but the choice to stay in my life as something smaller than what she was. I don't know how to categorize what I feel. Grief for Ruth is the loudest thing, the most present. She is who I was thinking of when I learned to walk and to read and to make her soups and to sit with hard things without running. She is who I am made of, even if not biologically. And Patricia is something new, a door that just opened into a room I didn't know was there. I'm standing in the doorway. I haven't decided how far in to go. What I keep coming back to is what Ruth said, that she chose me every morning, that the choosing was the point. That love is maybe less about origin than about the daily, repeated act of deciding that another person is worth everything. I think she was right. I also think I'll be working out what that means for the rest of my life. Patricia and I talk on the phone now, once or twice a week, usually on Sunday afternoons, which is when she always called Ruth. That's not something we discussed. It just happened that way, and neither of us has commented on it. I don't know if it's grief for Ruth or instinct or both. He's told me more about the circumstances of my birth, in fragments in the way that hard truths tend to come a little at a time when there's enough trust and enough space. It was not a simple situation. There were people involved who made her circumstances dangerous, and Ruth's decision to take me was, in Patricia's words, the only thing that kept me from losing both of us. I've been sitting with that for months. The weight of a sentence like that doesn't diminish with familiarity. I've met my brother and my sister. My brother is 31 and lives in Atlanta, and we discovered, when we first spoke on the phone, that we have the same nervous laugh. My sister is 28 and in graduate school and sent me a long email after our first meeting that I've read probably 40 times. She said meeting me felt like finding a piece of something she hadn't known was missing. I know exactly what she meant. I've been asked whether I'm angry. It's the most common question when I tell people pieces of this story. I've thought about it carefully because I want to give an honest answer rather than a clean one. The honest answer is, sometimes. I'm angry sometimes that I was 34 years old and didn't know my own biological family. I'm angry that I've been missing medical history that might be relevant. I'm angry at the years I sat across from Patricia at holiday dinners, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, and I never knew why. And then the anger passes, and what's underneath it is just love. Love for Ruth, who chose me every morning. Love for Patricia, who gave me up out of love and stayed in my life out of love and carried this for 34 years out of love. Love for the new people, the brother with the nervous laugh, the sister who sent the email, the family I'm still in the early stages of knowing. I don't have a tidy resolution. I don't think this kind of story has one. What I have is a bigger family than I knew I had, and a loss that I'm still grieving, and a life that has more rooms in it than it did a year ago. Ruth said she chose me every single morning for 34 years. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to choose the people who love me with that same consistency. That seems like the right inheritance.